They are planed off ridge lines, averaging a mean sea level elevation of 3, 4, or 5,000 feet. A strip then that's only about 4, 5, or 600 feet long. And when I say that's all along or goes straight, that's not very straight. That means it only has a 15 or 20 degree bend in it somewhere between the front and the end. The average width of these strips are about 35 feet, keeping in mind that our wingspan is 49 feet. The gear width is 10 feet. There's an upslope gradient, which you always land into. Of course, the upslope is above the downslope. A gradient of anywhere from 5 to 30 degrees of upslope. I really don't think of it as dangerous if I only have to worry about my own skill. Not that it's anything extraordinary, but if I can count on it. I know what my own limits are. And I know how long the strip is, how wide it is, and I know I can make it or I can't make it. I would say the primary dangerous factor is wind, gusts, and drafts. Wind varying direction, wind varying in intensity, and thermal, the lack of, the non-existence of, or the sudden presence of, can affect an aircraft's flight path so radically, so suddenly. And that's why when I come into a strip, from 5 minutes out, I'm searching for smoke, small fires for wind direction. You've really got to take your time and plan your approach carefully. A second factor is the runway condition. Standing water, sod, flat grass, these kind of things a pilot can't tell too well from the air. It can get him into very serious and critical trouble. So we have a great problem with maintaining the strips, and it's a great deal of eroding and rutting, loss of any markers that we could put into them, and the runway surface erodes so badly in just a matter of 2 weeks. The strip can be usable on a Monday, and on Friday it would tear off the tail wheel. So these are the things which make it dangerous. The elements of nature around you that are varying from day to day, and in fact, unfortunately, from minute to minute.
Skycat 60 Fox.
They know that our fixed-wing aircraft are supposed to report in every 30 minutes. And if they don't report in every 30 minutes, they query about it. And I hope they never lose interest in this. It's sort of a
the average mission we fly here, we carry 13 pallets. So we'll just drop 1 pallet the first time and use that kind of as a bore site. What's the area we picked as our aiming point. That's okay, then we drop 2 at a time. Even if it's a little bit off, we can still correct it on the next pass and just make a total of 7 passes. There are, of course, many ways to drop. In the C-46, well, I drop in circle, figure 8, triangle patterns, whatever the terrain calls for, or the turbulence or the weather. The majority of our drops, being there on hillsides and little cliff tops and mountain tops and things, we have to pretty much drop in just one direction. You want the bags falling perpendicular to the terrain. When the rice comes out of the plane, it's not only going to have the momentum from the aircraft, it's also going to start being affected by the wind. You vary your aiming point, I'd say up to 15 feet, 20 feet. For just an average wind. Sometimes it might be 50 feet if there's a good strong wind blowing. As you're coming into it, your load's going to be back by the door. It's going to be a little tail heavy. But as you drop, tail's going to come up. Nose goes down, you're rising anyway with this sudden loss of weight, especially later on when you're getting pretty much empty the last couple of pallets to go out. I always drop with the 25% flat. Get the tail a little high so when the rice comes out it gives you a little safety margin there so the rice won't hit the tail. Once you've found the power setting, normally in a smooth area, you don't have to change it. Maybe every 2 revolutions, drop 2 pallets, pull a ½ inch of manifold pressure off. It's a million little minor things that all have to be coordinated in together.
Hello, Skycap, Papa Echo Juliet.
Papa Echo Juliet, Skycap, go.
Papa Echo Juliet, completed drop primary Delta Zulu, Lima 05.
Roger.
Mark Hunter and the one also at Lumsden. So I do have to depend on the America to get me there. As a nurse education advisor, I'm responsible for working with a counterpart in each school of nursing. And the counterpart in the United States, he would be called the director of the School of Nursing. He is.
He's got a different outlook. Helicopters right down on the ground, flying low. He knows a lot more about how the people are living and what's actually going on up in that neighborhood.
They will work directly with...
This is the best way to move X from A to B. You're constantly thinking all the time of how you're going to approach the task and what your alternatives are and so on. Normally the loads will run about 1,500 pounds with the Dash 13 to the normal pads that we're going into up country. If you're going to an unknown place, you always plan for the worst. You have to take into consideration how your winds are blowing. If you have very strong winds that day, you might knock the load down a couple of 100 pounds just to be on the safe side. Your turnaround time with an external load is much faster. You can make an approach to a site, hook an external load up, and be off in less than 15 seconds. We always try and make our approaches into the wind as much as possible. This gives us more lift, longer, until you come out of transitional lift and are ready to hover over the pad. And then you just stabilize your hover high so that the load is not going to hit the pad with a jolt and damage whatever you're carrying. Flight mechanic, he's talking about how high the load is above the ground. He'll say 10 feet, 5 feet, 3 feet, 1 foot, touchdown release. At the same time, you can feel the load touch the ground and less power is required to hover the aircraft at that point.
The climatology here is 5 months of intensive rain each year, which of course brings on its own operating problems. 7 months of rather indifferent summer weather, which is accentuated by winds up country, dust in great quantities, almost like the Sahara Desert, reduced visibility, and the smoke from the burning of crops by the nomad tribes in the upland regions. This is a form of agricultural culture in Laos.
Which of course is an industry we want to keep rotor engine. To practice emergencies up to a point, if the engine is not idle, it's not available in case a mistake is made during the auto rotation. If a mistake is made, we must have the ability to fly it away. Saum has done very well from the beginning. We anticipate qualifying him as captain as soon as he can finish his area familiarization in northwest Laos.
Then,
When I brief new pilots, I'd like to get them off on the right foot. They're all part of the company, part of the pilot group. We help each other out every day. We depend on each other. We're the guys that are going to have to go pick a guy up if he goes down for an engine failure or something like that. And I try to foster this as much as possible. We depend on each other in the area for area briefings. If something happens, a changing situation, we'll pass it on to the other pilots as soon as you find out so that nobody else can run into trouble. This is the secret of our success out here, is to a large extent, is that we know what the other guy is doing.
On the H-30, maximum power to come right straight over and right straight down. There's no techniques involved. You would need about 50% more horsepower than actually is required. So you bring your cyclic back, and it brings the place back, and it's just stopping action. The flare actually will take care of probably most of your weight, and then most of your power is saved in case there is emergency. A good technique is you never pull power until after that tail touches, and that takes 30% of your load. So you can land using probably 50%, 60% of your available power. If you have power, you can pull back off. We have to fly very defensively over here because you never know exactly what's going to happen. Like that pad was the first time I'd ever seen it, let alone landing. But this is part of our job, probably a greater part of our job than carrying the rice, but they fit in well together. There's the welfare of these people, of course, which is the same reason for the rice. You are a part, and you're contributing to something that's greater than yourself. And this is very important in flying a helicopter. Now, as I take off, to use the least amount of power is good for technique, but also in case of power failure, it gives us the best chance of getting off the pad and getting to a low area. We want to get into translational lift as soon as possible, which in this aircraft is 13 knots. So as we take off now, if we turn directly into wind, we'd be going directly into the hill. We have our nose just to the left of the wind now. Directly in front of us is the greatest drop. We'll roll as far as we can, maintaining our ground cushion. Getting to the edge of the pad, we have to push forward. It's a slight cyclic, very smooth, so you don't spill any lift from that tip pad. Just as we break slip, we can feel that shudder. We're in translation, we decrease power, and we're offline. This is a more aggressive type takeoff, but it's the one we recommend and the one we teach.
This year, I've been working with curvature. This is the camber of the wing, and it extends for a constant value throughout the length of the wing and offers its very high lift capabilities. The propeller that is installed on our over 500 shaft horsepower turboprop engine produces a great amount of thrust, and combined with the high lift wing, gets us off the ground in 500-foot strips very reliably. The porter has installed in the cabin floor a swinging double door, and the release handle for that door is right up by the pilot's left hand. To drop rice out of the porter, you fly over the drop zone, simply pull this handle, and the rice is very accurately dropped. There are two things that enable the porter to land in short strips conveniently. One is its low approach speed through the airfoil shape, and the other is the reversible propeller on the engine. And when you approach a short strip at 55 knots and touch down smoothly, immediately affecting reverse thrust, why, it's just very impressive. I carry everything from baby pigs and freshly butchered buffalo to VIPs, in and out of 10,000-foot to 500-foot strips, all with equal facility, really. The airplane, when carefully prepared, is a very nice VIP airplane, although it's a little noisy inside. And when using it as a workhorse, why, it's very handy with a big, open, easily loaded cabin. It's real handy for carrying refugees, boxes, and odd-shaped packages, and mismanaged kids and unmanageable kids, and anything that you can think of.
And it's become attached to the program, attached to the people. And they've got very little to support them, especially when it comes to picking up sick or wounded. If we don't pick them up, the odds are that they're going to die, because all they have is the village witch doctor to help them out. Therefore, I've put out a little extra effort to go get a guy if he's in trouble.
The program itself is a village health program. It's kind of all we do in this area. I have responsible for the medics, the medical warehouse, and all the field dispensers. We can't airdrop the stuff, that's obvious. Make sure it's being used properly. So it has to be brought in by a slow aircraft. If they have 600 people that stay there, we keep a medic in. And we just primarily take care of the population. And we see that we get some medical care and for now refugee status and needing refugee relief and medicine. More so they're moving and resistance run down, and so they're prone to come down with the malaria and dysentery. So every site that we have left now has refugees moving in and through, and they're using more medicine. And finally, the job is just make sure that they're supplied. Check the dispensary first to see it's clean. Check to see that he's got his medicine right, and check his book. We have a record book. If there's no problem at most of these places, we just check on and see if they're all right. We like to know what's going on, and the USAID and James Chen wants to know what's going on, and Pop wants to know what's going on, and he wants American out there to see it, and then he wants Americans to be seen out in the villages. To let the people know that we're here and we're still supporting the program. It's a good program and good people to work with. Pop and all these guys are great. Pop people.
This is glutinous rice. It originally comes in from Thailand, packaged in 100-kilo bags. USAID has a contractor in Vientiane that triple bags the rice and cornmeal and salt for drop. The reason that it's put in triple bags is to resist breakage. It's undoubtedly cheaper to land rice than it is to drop it, because on landing rice there is practically no breakage. The rice is delivered at Watai Airport, where it is warehoused and palletized. The two bottom bags on the pallet are securely tied so that when the rice leaves the aircraft, the pallet does not fly up and hit the horizontal stabilizer. The remaining 7 bags are stacked on top of the first 2. The bags are shaken out so that they're as flat as possible and laid on a wooden pallet that is equipped with guide rollers to slide easily up and down the roller conveyors that are mounted in the aircraft. Each pallet is made up of 9 bags of rice. Each bag weighs 40 kilos, and the entire package is tied with a series of double ropes across the top and a slip knot in one side. The purpose of the slip knot is to provide a means for attaching a 15-foot static line. The other end is attached, of course, to the anchor line cable in the aircraft. As the rice is dropped over the DZ, the entire pallet leaves the aircraft, and at about 10 feet below the aircraft, the static line jerks the slip knot loose, and the bags begin immediately to separate. The purpose of this is to ensure that each bag hits the ground individually, as opposed to allowing the entire pallet to hit the ground as a unit. So we have found that when this happens, the entire package is apt to burst and a lot of rice is lost. When the bags hit the ground individually, there is comparatively little loss. In addition to delivering glutinous rice by free fall, we also deliver cornmeal and salt by the same method.
Here is patching up the ruts caused by the rain and marking it and making sure that the runway surface is smooth and suitable for use on a fixed-wing airplane. So this site is pretty primitive, and the tools available for use in constructing a runway. So we have to resort to very, very primitive methods, which rely on manpower alone. We use, as you can see, these dirt drags, which are simply burlap sacks, usually left over from a previous rice drop to the area. And I explained to them how to build these simple little wooden tampers for compacting the clay on the runway. And the villagers build the runway for their own use, medical evacuations, supplies, medical supplies. This strip is about 670 feet long, with a safe usable width of around 44 feet. It's only usable by Porter and Helio aircraft. It cannot be lengthened, obviously, due to the terrain limitations.
When you turn to final approach,
somewhere from base to final, and usually fairly far out. If you're loaded, you arrive at a point where you have to land the airplane. Due to the surrounding rising terrain on the other end of the strip, there's nothing to do but land it. The water buffaloes, people, or whatever, or updraft, downdraft that further damage your attempt at a good landing, you still know that you have to get to the end of that trip and land the airplane. That's it. This makes you pretty careful about committing yourself to this condition. You find and remember the strip that you can't go around, that you have to land on, and so you make every precaution that you can to be sure that you'll be able to safely land the airplane the first time. These are things that tax your ability to the utmost. Even the most experienced pilot tax. These are the things that just interest me. To figure if it's possible to do this with a modicum of safety and a reasonable degree of surety that you will be able to get the job done, as opposed to whether you better just forget it and give up. You're charged with this almost every day, and judgment's left to you all day long. Almost everybody here that sits in the left seat of an airplane has been in one war for sure, and maybe two or three. I personally have close to 15,000 hours, and I'd say probably the average of the captains out here is 10,000 hours or 7,000 at least. The pros, the ones that do it day in and day out, and actually do it as much for the love of flying as for the money that Air America pays them.
Because of the contacting them. Before I landed an up-country ship, I checked the field for security, also checked for horses or pigs on the ship. If there are any, I try to buzz them off. Winds are a big problem. After flying in this part of the world for the last 8 years for Air America, experience has taught me that wind cracks do not always indicate the true direction because of turbulence and changeability on these ridge-line strips. It's a tough trip. It's necessary that I get the maximum short takeoff and landing performance built into the trip. Area public safety. So these people have a tendency to want to cultivate any area that's been cleared. So the first pass is always an observation pass. Check it and make sure the livestock has been cleared off prior to making your landing approach. The strips themselves are very demanding. They're at up to a mile high as far as elevation, very short, very rough, and basically unimproved. Here, to an old carrier pilot, reminds me of landing aboard a carrier, and that you're approaching it in a manner that you're flying the aircraft with power and attitude and not too high a rate of descent, and aiming for a particular point. Also,
appropriate vehicle for carrying its own fuel around, simply because of limitations on weight and cube. And in many cases, this is compounded by the altitude at which the location is situated, where you would almost be unable to bring in anything more than a drum or two of fuel. So in the case of the 123 fuel drops, this is primarily in support of the choppers and, in some cases, the light aircraft. There's no point in putting 4 barrels of fuel in a quarter when you can drop the same 4 barrels on a pallet from a 123.
Well, it's like a wagon.
very heavy airplane, heavy on the controls. As they say, it takes 2 men to board to wrestle it around. But in my opinion, it's a good airplane. I don't think there's an airplane designed today that could do the job the 123 is doing. It's a coordinated effort between the co-pilot and kickers, the AFS, and the captain. When I have determined that I'm just about the right spot to drop, I call out over the radio to drop it. At free brief, my co-pilot hits the jet throttle switch. At the same time, I increase the lift engine to 100% power and start a pull-up and a climb. And this puts the airplane down in the position of the back end of it down a little bit so the load accelerates out the back end. What you really need is a fast acceleration when you drop. And the faster the acceleration, the faster the load departs the aircraft. And the faster the load departs, the smaller the DZ that you can put the load into. The jet gives us much more acceleration, so we can run out from under it much faster. In other words, I mean, as you accelerate, the load slides out the back end. As soon as the load's cleared the aircraft, then the AFS calls that the load is clear, and at that time, my co-pilot reduces...
especially when you're working in remote areas away from a central location. You're flying around there, I'm always looking at villages and open areas and looking to see what's going on down there, so to speak, and always watching the weather. The weather is very changeable this time of year now. Thunderstorms can move in behind you and cut you off, and then you're out there and you run out of fuel before you can get back to home base, so to speak. You always have to think, well, I've got to get back tonight. And the weather's bad, or the possibility of thunderstorms will block my way back, so I better start a little earlier, or go around and put more fuel in so I can get all the way back, and things of this nature.
Air America at Clark provides ground handling.
I find highly desirable and extremely valuable. For example, the work that is done with the refugees here, we have been called upon to exert a maximum effort in getting poor people out of a threatened or dangerous area within a very short time. Air America has been able to come up with a maximum airlift in the shortest possible time. I also can't help but be impressed with the gallantry of the Air America pilots and crew members. I think another factor that's important here is the variety of Air America assets in the country today, which range from your small, short-trip takeoff aircraft such as the Porters through the workhorse of airlift, the 46s. We thus have a whole range of aircraft that can be used so that we are able to economize to a great extent and to fulfill the mission that's assigned to us here. For example, if you have to take a doctor and a patient into a small strip or out of a small strip, if you use a Porter, it would save a great deal of money than if you had to use some larger aircraft on such a humanitarian mission.
This is usually done in a rather short span of time because the refugee movement is brought about by the advance of unfriendly forces, and it usually doesn't get started until the unfriendlies are within, let's say, hailing distance of where you're trying to remove the people from. So this adds a certain urgency to what we're doing, and means that you have to get as many people on the airplane as you possibly can and move them out as rapidly as you possibly can. It's sometimes a heart-rending sight to see these people, many of whom have moved countless numbers of times, getting on the aircraft with all their worldly possessions wrapped up in a bamboo or wicker container. You see an awful lot of sorrow, of hurt, of anguish, of people deprived of their livelihood, of families split up, of all the things that make up a migration of any kind of a population. This sooner or later gets to the guys. they get back and they don't want to talk about it at first, and then finally they do, and they say, you know, it sure is a heck of a note the way things are going. And maybe I can get in one more trip today. I could quit at 6, but I'll make it 7, because if I take that 7th one, I'll get somebody out. Somebody who might be deprived of their liberty or made to carry 40-kilo rice bags down a mountain trail for the rest of the existence. And they begin to become compulsive for this sort of, you know, one more trip means one more load. One more load means so many more people, either going in with supplies or coming out with people. And the job is to get that airplane there, fly it, take the load, bring it back, you know, do it again. There's no question in my mind moved by the enemy for many, many months and years would today be starving. You can almost see the hungry people surging forward to grab the rice when it lands, knowing that they're grateful for the way in which it's delivered to them by Air America, and you wonder what they'd do without it. There is an old story which maybe describes this, about one child who, when asked where rice came from, said it comes from the air, meaning that's where, in her opinion, it was grown, because that's, throughout her life, that's the only place she'd seen rice coming from. Any underdeveloped country, of which Laos is perhaps the prime example in Southeast Asia, you are going to need someone who can furnish the kind of service which Air America provides, whether it is in war or peace, and that is the movement of people, the movement of things, the movement of supplies, emergency and otherwise. It's going to be a long time before this part of the world has anything approaching the Los Angeles freeway. And until it does, there has to be a substitute mechanism for getting goods distributed and raw materials collected. And only air can provide that. And we don't make policy in America. We simply execute the end product, which is deliver the goods